Your brain is lying to you. It's telling you lies and making you unhappy and holding you back because it thinks that it's keeping you safe, but it's not. These common thought traps are keeping you stuck. I've been trapped by every single one of these before because they are so easy to fall into. But now I know how to get out of them, and I want to help you learn how to get out of them too. In this video, I'm going to share 5 styles of distorted thinking with examples and explanations of why we think this way so you can be on the lookout for these traps. And make sure you stick around until the end because I'm also going to share what you can do to avoid them altogether or get out of them once you're in. So let's get into it. The first trap is called filtering. This is when you take the negative details and magnify them while filtering out all positive aspects of a situation. Let me ask you this. Have you ever gotten a good grade on a test and instead of celebrating that good grade, you criticize yourself because you could have done better? Or in a job review, you got mostly positive feedback, but one area you could improve on, and that area for improvement is all you can think about. So you're upset that you got negative feedback. Or when you look back on a certain time in your life, you can only remember the negative feelings you had at the time and don't remember anything positive about it. Maybe you're even experiencing this right now, and in the present, you're hyper-focused on the negative aspects of your current situation and filtering out anything positive that you do have going for you. It's really understandable that we do this, especially for those of us who are neurodivergent, because many of us didn't get the support we needed growing up, and we struggle with rejection sensitivity. When we are constantly criticized and chastised for the way our brains work, and we're told we just need to try harder when we're trying as hard as we possibly can, of course, that only supports us focusing on the negative and makes us sensitive to feedback or rejection later on because we're so hurt from those early experiences. Another aspect of this has to do with how memory works. Conscious memory is extremely unreliable because when we're remembering something, we're not actually remembering the situation itself. We're remembering the last time we remembered it. So especially if we're focusing on the negative in the moment, we're going to look back and remember those negative aspects and feelings more than anything positive, and those are going to reinforce themselves over and over again over time. Before I move on to the second thought trap, if you can think of any specific examples of these from your own life, write them down or make a note in your phone because that will help you at the end of this video when I share what to do to help you get out of these traps. The second thought trap is polarized thinking. This is when you think things are black and white, good or bad, you have to be perfect, or you're a failure. There's no middle ground. This one hits super close to home because black and white thinking is so common for neurodivergent people. The keywords to look out for here are always or never when it comes to your behavior, someone else's behavior, a situation, or a circumstance. This can also sound like I'm stupid or I'm a failure. The specific thing I want you to look out for is when you make a mistake, what kind of language do you use about yourself? A lot of people very nonchalantly will say things like, I'm so stupid or I'm so dumb. Things like that actually matter a ton. So whenever I make a mistake now, instead of saying, oh, I'm so stupid or something like that, I'll say something like, that was so silly or I'm so silly, or I won't make a comment about it at all. And I'll just apologize if it affected someone else or just move on because we're human and humans make mistakes. Our brains want things to be black and white because it would be easier that way. If there was no nuance, we wouldn't have to think so hard. The truth is, things can be black and white, but most of the time they aren't. And it's important to leave space for the nuance that does exist. A couple things to remember here. 2 opposing ideas can be true at the same time. If you're wondering if something is this or that, it's probably both. And always and never statements are rarely helpful or true. Which leads us to the next style of distorted thinking, overgeneralization. This is when you come to a general conclusion based on a single incident or piece of evidence. If something bad happens once, you expect it to happen over and over again. Always and never statements can also fall under this category because those are usually overgeneralizations, but they can also look like predicting outcomes. So let's say after you get rejected from a job interview, you tell yourself that the job market is too hard or you're unemployable and assume that you'll never get a job. Giving up. After you spend a small amount of time on something, you give up because it's too confusing or it's too hard, or you say that you can't do it. You can also overgeneralize other people's actions, saying, "You never listen," or "You always ignore me," to a friend, family member, or romantic partner. Again, cue the always or never statements there. Stereotyping is a form of this as well. So when you see one thing about someone and you assume a bunch of things about them, that is overgeneralizing. Many of us who are neurodivergent are sensitive and good at pattern recognition. So sometimes our brain can tell us there's a pattern when really we don't have enough evidence to say for certain. And again, we're prone to black and white thinking. So overgeneralizations can be really easy to make. But keep in mind that the same thing that was true in the past could be true in the future, but it's likely not true in every single circumstance. The fourth trap is mind reading. This is when, without their saying so, you think you know what people are feeling and why they act the way they do. In particular, you are able to define how people are feeling towards you, and it's usually negative. Thoughts like, "They think I'm boring, they must think I'm stupid, they don't like me, they don't want me there," or "They think I'm annoying." This one is also easy to fall into for people who can easily pick up on other people's emotions. And maybe you've had negative experiences in the past that are leading you to this conclusion. But it's important to remember that other people's feelings aren't always about you, and often they have nothing to do with you at all. For me, I know that I'm a really good vibe reader, but I do have to remind myself that doesn't mean that I know what other people are thinking. No one can read minds, and when we've fallen into this trap, the conclusions we come to are usually hurtful to us and give very little credit to the individual whose mind we think we are reading. Let me ask you this. How many times have you had a positive thought about someone when you're interacting with them, but you didn't tell them? Imagine if that person at that moment thought to themselves, "They must not like me," or "They must think I'm boring," or some other negative thing that they might be insecure about. That would suck, right? You would hate for people to think that you're thinking negatively of them when you're actually thinking something positive. And then imagine if they distance themselves from you because they convinced themselves that whatever negative thing they thought you thought about them was true. That would suck even more, because then you would probably think that they didn't like you when really they thought you didn't like them, and y'all could have had a great friendship if it wasn't for both of you thinking you could read the other person's mind. You can see how mind reading can quickly become a problem and break down connections, so communication is usually going to be the better route. When it comes to mind reading, I try to remember that other people's thoughts that they don't share with me are none of my business. And I try to treat people and set boundaries based on their words and actions towards me, not based on what I think they think about. And personally, I also try to share my positive thoughts about people with them so they don't think that I'm thinking something negative about them. And the last style of distorted thinking, before we talk more about what you can do to avoid falling into these traps, is catastrophizing. This is when you expect disaster. You notice or hear about a problem and start the what ifs. What if tragedy strikes? What if something happens? What if? This can be the beginning of a long and dark spiral that makes us feel completely hopeless and out of control. It usually sounds like, if this bad thing happens, then this other bad thing will happen, then this even worse thing will happen, and then my life will suck and I'll never be able to recover, or I'll be a total failure. By the end of it, we're worried about that last big, horrible result that is so far into the potential future that we really don't have any control over it, which makes us feel even worse. Like we said at the beginning, our brain thinks these thoughts are helpful, but really, they're just keeping us stuck. Thinking about what could maybe, potentially, possibly happen in the future is not helpful or productive and will not keep you safe if that thing happens. So what you actually need to do is think about the best possible scenario. What's your ideal situation that you would want to happen? And then work your way backwards for what steps you need to take to get to that ideal future. I'm not saying not to have backup plans or to never plan for the worst possible scenario, because unexpected things do happen and we do need to be prepared when those things happen. But catastrophizing is not a helpful thought process and will not help you prepare for a worst case scenario. It will literally just paralyze you and prevent you from taking any action at all. So how do we stop these distorted thinking patterns? And how do we prevent ourselves from falling into these traps in the first place? Whether you're stuck in any of these traps now or you are prone to falling into them, the good news is you can learn how to recognize them before you fall into them. And you can learn how to get out of them when you do. The first step is awareness. We have to be aware that we're falling into one of these distorted thinking traps in order to be able to do anything about it. And awareness can be harder than you think sometimes. These patterns of thinking have been operating without your knowledge for a long time. So bringing them to our awareness as they're happening can take practice. These thought patterns are usually the result of a perceived threat. So our fight or flight response is being triggered, and those heightened emotions can make it harder to intervene in the moment. That is why I wanted you to take notes of anything specific that came to mind while we were going through them, and why it's important to learn what to do before you're in that triggered state, because that can help give us a better chance of successfully disrupting the thoughts before we fully fall into the trap. I recommend keeping the notes that you made handy so that you can refer back to your list regularly and add to it when you notice any more of those distorted thinking patterns as you go about your day-to-day. Right now, the goal is just to recognize when you have these thoughts, not to change them or judge them. It can also help to reward yourself when you discover them. It may sound silly, but simply telling yourself good job when you recognize them is enough to create dopamine and trigger your positive reward system. So once you recognize your thoughts, step 2 is acceptance. We have to accept the reality of the situation before we can do anything about it. That's why once we're aware of our thoughts, the next step is not to judge or criticize them, but to accept them. I like to remind myself that judgment and criticism are not helpful, but understanding is. The important thing here is to recognize and validate why your brain would think that line of thinking is helpful without accepting or criticizing the validity of the thought itself. Your brain is trying to keep you safe, and in the past, those thoughts were the best way it knew how. But now we are learning a new way to keep ourselves safe. We also have to accept that that old way of thinking is going to come up sometimes, and that's okay. Of course it is. But when it comes up, we now have the opportunity to implement a better way. Remember that your feelings are valid, but even though something feels true, that doesn't mean it is true. And acting impulsively on a feeling that is based on something that we don't know is true may not be good for you. Something that's been helpful for me in this acceptance phase is practicing sitting with a problem instead of taking action immediately. In the past, I would notice something I thought was a problem and want to take action to solve that problem right away, only to find out later what I thought was a problem wasn't actually a problem, and my solution only made things worse, not better. So now I practice noticing a problem, which is awareness, and then instead of taking immediate action, I remind myself that I'm not in the decision phase yet. That comes later. And I first need more information. I need to accept the situation for exactly what it is, rather than labeling it as a problem or taking action before I have all of the information. All of those steps come later. First, we have to be aware and accept the situation at face value. Does that make sense? The goal is to notice the thoughts themselves, and rather than judging or accepting them as true or not, we then gather more information and accept the reality of the situation and the fact that we have the thoughts. So those are the first 2 steps in our process, and I'm going to pause there because those are really important steps that I want you to focus on, and make sure you're subscribed so you can catch part 2 of this series where I'll talk about the next 5 styles of distorted thinking and the next steps in our process to avoid falling into those traps. And in the meantime, check out this video.